Thank you for the Michael. Thank everyone. It's a great pleasure to share with all of you about my experiences working at Boston College. And so, for many years in the United States, many Catholic Christian universities require all students to take some theological courses and studies. And of course, for a long time, the theological studies and courses have been praised as fostering the development of theological ideas, practice, and values to cultivate well-rounded people for common good of our society in many Christian and religious affiliated universities in the States. But in the last few years, in the last about 10 years, more and more students from overseas study in the US, and this number has been increasing. The enrollment in 2018 to 2019 academic year in my research here hit a record high with more than 1 million international students studying in the US. And large number of them study in the Catholic or Christian universities. So there's a big number eventually who will have to take theological and religious courses. But in my research, many of them is a student from China or some other Asian countries. The lack of very basic background of theological and religious knowledge. So it'd be a very big challenge for them. And most people who from China who come study in the US, and they found it very difficult to conceptualize, to digest these theological and religious studies there. So many of these Christian universities, Catholic university colleges require students take one or two theological courses as a part of the core major requirement, like a Bible, introduction to Christianity, and other biblical studies. In my research or in my experiences in last about 8 years, and I found that more of them could not really enjoy to study. So in my course, I teach this Christianity and Chinese religion in dialogue. So I try to make something very different and try to help students understand what does it mean to study theology and how do we help students to understand our traditional theology in dialogue, in communication, in bridging with their own culture, with their own tradition. And of course, how do we help people to provide more disciplined reflection about the mystery of God in the world and also our own tradition? It's like Confucian teaching or belief or ethical and right and worship to shape our community of faith, regardless if people maybe have no faith, no spiritual background. So in the beginning of my course, I always ask students to answer what make you happy. So what's your passion? What's your passion? So how do this opportunity to study theology for academic and faith integration in and outside the classroom setting? And how my course and program in this curriculum relevant to your learning, I mean students' learning and faith development. And also ask our faculty members, some administrators to answer, how do they preserve the value of theological studies? And how does the theological studies and dimension are conceptualized and carried forward with students who have no theological and religious background at all? So how do we and the faculty member, like instructor, and how can I or they effectively guide the students for theological studies, reflection, and research? I always tell students 3 terms in the Boston College: the knowledge and reflection and action. So how do your own tradition and with the westernized or Christianity tradition to help you to become a good person and good citizen? And how do your own cultural and social and personal economical factors affect your study of theological learning? So these questions always bring to students to think about this one. Also, I reflected by myself. and its program content and the delivery format and instructional approach affect students' learning in theological studies in and outside the classroom. And of course, the question that I keep on asking students every week is, what are challenges do you have? What's the experience you want to share with your classmates, with your teachers, not only about my course, but also other theological courses, philosophy courses you have taken. So how do we as an instructor and professor, and how do institutions help students to access the wisdom and value of Christian tradition for the life on and off campus? So I combine all these questions and content into my teaching. First time I teach the Christianity and Chinese religion dialogue. I try to bring something in the Christian tradition like love, virtue, ethics, and justice and harmony and peace and universal love in comparing to the Chinese religious tradition. I talk about I Ching and Dao De Jing, and also some of the philosophical and theological tradition from the Buddhism and Taoism. So I try to make some of the common theme where students found it so interesting to study, to learn. In the first week, when I teach the course, say theological study in a Western tradition about God, universe, and form and beings, and transformation, transcendental being. So they found it so hard to understand it. So then I try to make some concrete ethical issue. I talk about the love. I say in the Chinese religion, the love is so important, the filial piety, and the love from the king to the subject, the parent to the children, and vice versa, and universal love. So all connect with our Christian tradition, is these values. So basically, these are something I share with students. So they also try to understand what's the best way I can understand, for the Jiang's course, other people's course, and how do I really apply to my life. So I told my students to learn something not to fulfill requirements, but something you can take to your own home. You can make a big difference. You can help your neighbors, your friends, be a global leader, a global citizen. So I combine all these different theories and knowledge and different themes. So people still found it's much easier than the traditional theological studies. So for example, I told students that when you talk about love, I said love is a big word, very abstract, but love must be manifesting concrete action. I use St. Ignatius Loyola's words, and also use the biblical teaching from Jesus, and also then from Confucius, Lao Tzu, and Zhuangzi, and other Chinese philosophers, their ideas. So I say, study theology or religion is not something so hard, so far from your own life. It's an everyday practice. It's not something before or in the future, but right now. So just like Confucian tradition, something we are living in the present. And I said that the past is gone. The future is unknown. That is the present's gift. How do we make a gift to share with the people? How do you study the theological, ethical issue and spiritual issue and social, cultural issue to make you as a whole person? And then you become a leader to influence or lead the people to build a better society. The kingdom, I use the term kingdom, is not something high above or something abstract. The kingdom is you are the one build the place, environment with love, with virtue, with justice. So also compare like Lao Dao say and the Taoism teaching about environmental protection and environmental destruction. So these are something not past many years, but now it's very practical. So I think for me, teach theological studies or ethical issue should be more flexible. We cannot only teach about Trinity, which is great, talk about the dogmas and catechism, because for these students, they found it so hard to understand it. But something more practical, more relevant to our own life, then they will reflect, they will think, they will pondering, and then they will make actions. So I think for me, this is a way to motivate them to study some theological research and knowledge is better than just go to traditional dogmatical studies. So I try to make some more flexible. I try to bring the real case in their own life. I say, if you happen is the case, if Jesus is here, how did Jesus tell you? If Confucius here, how did he tell you? If you were there, how do you make a good action in a in a night of Christian ethic issue, theological issue, or traditional Chinese religious issue? So I think there's something we must be flexible to tell students study theology or religion is no longer abstract way or very mystical way or legendary, but something you can actualize into your own life. You can guide your students or like my students towards a better or brighter future by learning some theological conception or tradition. And then not about the past. I said the past is just remain in the past, but how do you use the past theories like the beatitude, like a love, like the ethical and the justice and virtue, and practice it into your own life. I think these are something I try to use different themes to share with students, so that they found it much easier, much lighter than just tell them about what happened, Constantinople degree, what happened in 255, there's a council. So sometimes these are very important, but I think for students who learn some theological issue, I try to make a more practical, more relevant to our today's life. So there are some just personal experiences, maybe you can have your own experience, so they share with you. Yeah.
So, Father Jiang, thank you very much for your presentation. As I said, I thought we could marshal our questions now, put you on the spot. I had a lot of questions of my own, but I would like to first defer pressing questions or comments or points of clarification that you'd like to raise right now with Father Jiang.
Sure. I wonder, when you mentioned that it's a little bit difficult for somebody from a very different context to come to the strong American culture that has a lot of idiosyncrasies, what are maybe one or two most difficult things that you encounter when students begin explore this common thread that holds together a lot of the American society, so Christianity?
Thank you, Chris. I think, of course, the common thing is the culture shock. And even in a larger society, because they come to US, it depends also. Some people start high school here, they may easy to enjoy or mingle with the larger culture and society, but people purely come from China, like finish high school at age 18, when they come to the States, there's a big cultural shock about American way of thinking and doing business. So I tried to, I wrote a book about American higher education, other things I try to share with them about, so when you come here, to do, not to do, this kind of guidance also. And also regarding to come study theology. And people first found, what is theology? For them, because they are from China, our education is a very different system. We never talk about theology or religion in our school. So when we come to here, what is theology? For them, it's very abstract. So when I tell people, in my case, I never tell them, my intention really to try to help them understand the theological in an indirect way. I can't tell them directly because I don't know people feel I'm convert them with my strategy. So eventually I tell them, theology is really one of the highest sciences. And we must learn with a combined about history, philosophy, culture, education, they cover everything. So it's not something only to believe God. It's much more theology, much bigger, larger than that conception. Then eventually study, historical theology and also other topics. So I found that in the beginning, it's found it so hard, but eventually, if we give a better introduction and guidance, I think that can help them to understand it. It's not about, superstition. It's not about something people want to convert you, but something about science, about culture. about history, about philosophy, about life. That's the way I can help them.
Do you have any comments or questions that you wanted to raise at this point?
Sure. I have just one quick question. Father Joseph, you mentioned that you talk about some ethical concepts such as love, which I find to be beautiful. So are there any rudimentary elements of theology that you also cover? Like you mentioned Trinity, and is there anything else like you try to, what kind of ground do you try to cover in the Catholic tradition?
Basically, I cover the basic classical tradition like creation, or the Old Testament history and New Testament, and eventually for I have 3 parts. Okay, first, historical parts about the biblical tradition. Then the second part is about the dialogue, some common thing in the West and the East. And the third part is about how do we make practical actions. So when I talk about the Trinity issue, really about love, I say when you talk about Trinity, God is the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. The people have never known what the 3 persons, 3 beings, the personality. They could not want to understand it. I say, well, I try to say it is about love. God loves the world so much. John Gospel, John chapter 3, he gave his only son. So I say, in your Chinese tradition, who would give their son to save or to share, to love people? I mean, if we talk about pure Trinity, they have no idea. So I try to use some of the practical issue, also practical stories to guide them. I use family programs, marriage issue to guide them to understand the love. And so use the image of the Trinity. I basically cover traditional theological teachings in the classical tradition, but I use not a purely dogmatic way, but I try to combine and share, say, if there is something like a golden rule, and then I say Confucius golden rule and Jesus golden rule. So how do you share this rule in whichever aspect stand your support or against? Yeah. So there's something I try to make something more practical, relevant to their life.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Indeed. One of the things that I heard you mention is talking about how religion can help to make us ethical persons. The goal is to be a whole person, to serve in society and serve in your family. I see this as sort of moving all of the faiths into an existential key. How does this impact us as persons? So I think that probably is a very, very good move in order to help us understand some common ground between faiths. Am I hearing you correctly? Is that
yes, Michael? Yes, Michael. I think the purpose for my theological course is a core requirement is to help students to become a better citizen, better person, better human being. In the end of our theological teaching or quest or some research exploration is to help students people become a better citizen and human being to create a society with harmony, with order, with justice, with love. I say that's the highest, that's the only goal about theological, not to talk about God. God is very important, of course, I love God. But I say something be more practical. When you talk about God to students, they ask me questions, Father, why suffering? Use the very famous word from a job. Why me? Why my children? Blah, blah, blah. And I answer them, say, Pope Francis asked some question. But sometimes we must think about if people suffer, what can do? I taught them about the Mother Teresa, her story. I said, what's love? What's the power? How do you change the world? So, I mean, in the end, I think for me, for my course, for Michael and everyone here, is to guide the students to really to be a ethical, spiritual, and whole person, and to share the love. That's a very fundamental for our theological research, unless we go to purely academic, intellectual. But for this, for students want to learn not only about God or our church as institution, but also a God and church as a life subject. where we can share together. We are co-creator, I told students. Yeah.
So this raises another question for me. So if you find the sort of the what I might call the existential common ground of Confucianism, Taoism, there are many different Taoisms, but Lao Tzu's teaching and so forth, Christianity. You're finding a meeting place, and of course there's similarities and differences in those meeting places. But you're, in a certain sense, there's a kind of a ethical and existential reductionism there, and you're looking for the common ground. How do you then also bring out that there is a whole world view to Christianity, a structure that holds together and that is transformative of the person when they step into that world view? In other words, if we're just looking at how everything is similar, it's like, oh, well, why do I need Christianity? I could just get it from something else. Do we look at what's also distinctive about Christianity?
Yes, good question from Mike. I did it. First time I say people think about all religion, or it's about charity, about love. I say, yes, we are common value, common sense, common work to do for charity, for global peace, global engagement, for justice, ethics. But I say our Christianity, something different is incarnation. I say you may find it difficult, incarnation, but I say it is second person of God, Jesus, who become human being, who died, who suffer, and who raised. I say any religion globally, no other religion. I say Buddha did not die for people. Confucius did not die for people. I don't mention other religion to avoid the conflict. I say, but Jesus, he role incarnation. God become a human being. Either it's a historical Jesus or spiritual theological Jesus, but he is a real person here right now with us. And we are the one, I told them, I say, why do I love you, my dear students? And why do I do many other work? I say, it's because the God, the Jesus who loves me, he pushes me, he motivates me to love you. I said, I was not born as a personal love. No, I said, no, really become Jesuit, become the Catholic, it's because I experienced how powerful God's love is. That's why, I say your parents, your people praise me, oh, you're great, you help many people. I said, no, not because I'm I. It's because my God who loved me, who really inspired me, enlightened me, guided me, pushed me, motivated me to love you. I said, that's a unique, that's a different. That's the incarnation of Jesus. Who in me, I'm in him. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting because you used this word that also shows up in your talk here, this word love. And one of the things I remember from my meager studies of Chinese philosophy is the debate between Moyism, this advocate of universal love, but a kind of in a utilitarian sense, benefit everybody, versus Confucianism, which said, we have particular relationships. We don't love everybody equally. You have more obligations and responsibilities to your parents or your brothers or your family, to your emperor, or to your ruler or your friend, than you do to some stranger. And there's sort of gradations there when you talk about love. So I was wondering, when I was reflecting on this, I know that that's been a debate in Chinese society, and the idea of universal love of Moyism was kind of thrown out. That's a kind of an abstraction, and nobody really lives that because it's not human. It doesn't accord with human feelings. That was the traditional line. What about contemporary China, the Communist Party, the views on Mozi today? Where is that, and what would Chinese students encounter about this idea of love before coming to the United States?
Well, good question, because every Friday I have meeting with 50 to 60 students from China in the normal time before pandemic. Well, now we're doing some online meeting every week, trying to mingle with students. There's a long dinner together anyway. So I accompany, walk with them in the beginning. So before they come to the States, I think their love was more for me, or from the sharing is more about the very personal. Well, the China talk about the love, the communal love means society is larger, more important than the family. But now I think more people, the students, from their very personal love, the love from the family or to the family. They may not really care much about a bigger love than before, than 30, 40 years ago, when all countries have different system or different ideology. But now student love is more about the private, more personal, even more small scale. Before was I sacrificed my life for my country, for my whatever. People now really talk about this one. We care about my parents, my grandparents, and myself. So I think that's a big shift. Even though there's still political reason behind, but I think most students, as far as I knew, is only not really care about something bigger, but more personal, private, or just small communal community, but not really party or nation, something like that way. Even though by slogan they will talk like that way. So it's more individual than communal.
More individual than before.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.